Well, my particular project is called Audience Development in the Community. So we're trying to go out into the community and connect with people who don't normally come to the theatre, or who many people in Bedford don't even know that the Place Theatre exists yet. And for those who are listening, it's on Bradgate Road.
Wow.
We were established in 2001. I think it was the building was an old boys' club, and it started off as a community theatre, just doing sort of I suppose a venue for local amateur dramatic groups. And then we started to bring in professional shows, and then the need for more staff came on, and so we have an admin person, a venue manager, myself, and another producer who looks after programming. And then we are staffed quite a lot in front of house by volunteers. So and so my particular project goes out into the community and tries to make work with groups who feel disconnected from the arts in some way, and try to raise raise awareness isn't the right term.
Your eyebrows are going in. Yes. Makes it sound as though you don't really like that phrase.
I don't really like it, that it's raising awareness. It's more that we're trying to break through cultural barriers that people feel. Some people feel that the arts aren't for them due to perceived traditions, or something that they never grew up going to the theatre, or really feeling that drama or music or in a participatory way was for them. So we're trying to break down those cultural barriers and beliefs, and
resonates perfectly with what we're doing with Virtual Orchestra.
Yes,
so which is kind of lucky, but also I think intentional. Really,
yes.
Having you here is kind of amazing.
Yes.
The virtual. Well, now that you've introduced it now, so you must continue to talk about the Virtual Orchestra.
Yeah.
I mean, it was seamless what you did there. It really was. It's like you've been
changed careers, right? Yeah. The Virtual Orchestra, yeah. So it's delivered by, or powered by, as we're saying, the Philharmonia Orchestra. And the Philharmonia are obviously, our home base is London, but we have 4 city-based residences. So in each of Bedford, Leicester, Canterbury and Basingstoke, we're running this project, which is effectively all of the exciting digital output that the Philharmonia have developed over the last decade, bundled into one place, and doing trying to achieve exactly what Elizabeth has just been saying about the place, in a slightly different way. It's a bit more sort of, chucking a big stone in a pond and trying to create ripples that way, rather than the sort of perhaps slightly more grassroots work that you do.
Yes.
But actually, the reason why Elizabeth met Tom Spurgin from our audience development team was because the big part of this project work, beyond just the physical that you can see, the big physical tent and installation and the VR headsets, is having a local steering group. And so we invited Elizabeth and other local organisations to be on a steering group, effectively to help target and guide and say, who is it that you're trying to reach, how are you interacting? So rather than it being sort of happenstance, actually there's quite a sort of thought through process about bringing something big that then helps achieve those connections.
And who are the people who need to be? Well, I mean, I don't like the word targeted, really, but we've used it. But who are the people that you're?
So it's different in every location. So Bedford's the first, so we're learning a lot here actually about where it is working, and perhaps sometimes when it isn't. Interestingly, but certainly from our side, what we've been telling funders, and of course that matters because they're the people who are making this, helping make this happen, is effectively trying to reach people who would ordinarily have barriers to go into cultural institutions, i.e. that going through the door to the theatre or going through the door to the concert hall is the problem, because they don't identify themselves with that. And in many ways that's actually a much wider target audience than just saying socioeconomic deprived or particular ethnicity groups or particular segments of community, because actually what we're saying is there might be somebody that would live in a postcode where all their neighbours go to stuff, but they might feel that it's not for them. And that's in the widest sense the target, right?
Yes, yeah, I think so, yeah. And I think it was a really clever and important thing, encouraging local arts organisations to get on board with the virtual orchestra, because when something is local, like a big company like the Philharmonia can swoop into Bedford and then leave six weeks later, 6 weeks later, and not maybe have had a very big presence here in Bedford for these 6 weeks, but then just leave. But by making the connections with the local groups, the effect is ongoing. And I think people, for me, the way to connect with people is to understand their identity somehow, and a big thing for people is identity of place where they live. So by contacting the local arts organisations and the names that people are familiar with, even if they don't go to these organisations on a regular basis, there'll still be some connection with this local identity, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to ask you a very difficult question. I mean, I've flagged it now, and just say, could you possibly could you follow the lovely Elizabeth's example of holding the microphone and not do this?
Sorry.
No, I'm not looking for an apology. The apology is redundant and therefore rejected. I'm just saying that, I mean,
I'm profusely apologetic.
No, I don't want any more.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's just that when you do that, then things start breaking.
Oh, sorry. God, your technology is really, really...
Shit?
Yeah. I was going to say temperamental.
No, it's just it starts to peak and then I can't concentrate and I'm sorry. So there we are.
I'm trying hard. I was being relaxed. I'm not relaxed anymore.
The thing I'm fascinated by is that possibly my preference for work is that there is a tangible output. So if I'm involved in a particular function or an organisation, I need to feel as though I can demonstrate my output. And I get the impression that what both of you do is essentially sort of influencing and creating a vision, and I'm not suggesting that isn't a valuable thing, but I wonder how you go about proving your value and demonstrating your effectiveness. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Because I totally buy into what you're doing,
yeah.
And I see it's important. But there's a lot of talking and influencing and persuading. And how do you know when you've done a good job? That's
well, you don't. Part of it is that you never fully know, because actually what we're talking about is a level of interaction with people that's emotional and subjective. And all right, you can gather feedback, you can talk to them, but fundamentally, the arts you never can measure in that way.
You're smiling in a slightly maniacal way.
Well, but
you're okay with that then?
Well, no, and it's partly because you're asking a provocative question, which I like, because. We're often asked that by funders, by anybody who's involved with us, and of course we always try and turn around and we're doing so much evaluation on a project like this. But fundamentally, we're here because we care about the art, we care about the music, but also from Elizabeth's perspective, the theatre, anything artistic, because of its value intrinsically to people, because we think it enriches lives. But actually, all right, there's so many measures you can put on that, but fundamentally, it depends on what so many factors of somebody coming and interacting with us that we can't fully measure that.
I'm talking about, but I get that. I'm talking about your personal contribution to...
Oh, God, I do sod all then, yeah.
How very honest of you. Okay, well, we'll come to you later. But do you see what I mean? How do you...
Yeah, well, my personal contribution, gosh. In terms of measuring that, I suppose it's about, setting out objectives to begin with, and then writing a report afterwards and stating how each of those objectives were met, and were they met, to a particular capacity or to a smaller capacity, and I suppose, like Jonathan said, there's so much emotion involved in these things. Also, you sort of feel if something was a success or not. So there's instinct that goes into it, and then also in the feedback that you get, I like written feedback because I think it gives people an opportunity to be honest. A lot of people will come up to you and say, "Oh, that was great," and it's just
you're quite
lip
suspicious.
service, you know.
Write it down.
So
Yeah,
yes,
you want
yeah,
it
you know,
in
and
writing.
anonymous, so, you know, and all of that. And so if people are coming back and giving positive comments, or, you know, and the inevitable negative comments, and that, I mean, I want negative comments because that's how we'll learn. So I suppose we judge it in those terms, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose it's easy just to say, oh, it was a great success, we sold 200 tickets or whatever, and you can judge particular things in monetary terms, like this concert that's going to be on the 10th of August here in Bedford.
Nice plug.
Wow,
Yeah,
you're famous too, aren't you?
that the Philharmonia.
Secret high five down here.
So for those who are listening, we have the Philharmonia is coming to Bedford on the 10th of August, and there's going to be a concert.
There is actually a whole event. It's sort of almost a festival. So we're at our home venue in Bedford, which is the Corn Exchange. We're there 6 times a year anyway, but this concert is specifically linked to this installation. There'll be some parkour happening on the way into the hall. There's a lot of pop-up performances, and then the full orchestra, the Philharmonia, will be on stage in what is, for me as an artistic administrator, kind of the first time I've ever designed a concert like it is. It's very unusual. We're working with a guy called Tim Steiner, who does some work with us, usually in education settings. Got a conductor called Kwame Ryan coming in, who's done some contemporary music with us. And the drive behind this was, if we're really going to go to new audiences, not our typical audience, we want to sell this to people who've never been before. They don't know their Mozart from their Schoenberg, from their Birtwistle. And so we've really tried to build a program that actually showcases the best of the whole range of orchestral music. It's kind of interesting and an experiment, and it might go tits up, but I hope it does the opposite. And
you love this work, don't you? I can tell that you love this work.
Yeah. Well, particularly when it feels like it's vibrant and connecting in a way with what's current, what's new, but also this sort of legacy of orchestral music. And I'm fully impassioned by the idea that the sector needs this work, otherwise it will sort of write its own death sentence. Because if we carry on with sort of effectively the museum version of what orchestras are about, which is not to say that the whole industry does that, but that's quite common. And a common audience development approach has been very much to look at what's already popular. But frankly, that's kind of bullshit, because it's popular with the 5% of the population who listen to this music in person regularly.
And me. Yeah, I like it.
Well, yeah, no, don't get me wrong, I'm in it because I grew up with it and love it. But actually, look, I often compare it to visual arts, where, you know, our office is in London, right by Tate Modern. And you look at somewhere like that has achieved so much in terms of saying to people, it's fine to come and not like this or like it, but people come. And the same is true of music. I actually quite enjoy it in this installation. I'm rabbiting on, sorry, but I'll shut up.
Please.
I like it in this installation when people come through and they've spent some time and come out and say, I didn't like it. I'm just as interested in that. I honestly am, because they've engaged. And the thing that kills me is when people just don't care.
Oh, I agree with you. There's nothing worse than somebody just going, yeah, okay.
And the thing is,
why are you wasting my time?
The more we present stuff that feels like it's a little bit sort of just, you could go and see it in a museum, or frankly, I should say this tentatively, you could listen on your own VR experience at home and not ever have to see it live in person, the less important it is, the less I want to do this work. Whereas this project uses the digital, it takes that, it creates the first point of contact, which then hopefully, and we're seeing it already happen, drives that kind of, okay, I'll go and see that. And actually what's encouraged me most, I don't know about you, is the people who clearly have never encountered it before and then do say, God, I really want to see that live.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's not about putting people totally out of their comfort zone. It's just pushing them a little bit to the left or the right, you know, of where what they're used to, and trying to connect with them, you know, in terms of what they already know. So in Bedford, you know, in terms of their hometown, but then bringing this new experience that they, you know, maybe they're not big classical music lovers or whatever, but they get to know a piece and get to understand it a little bit better. And I think, just if I may, that on the 10th of August, the idea that a parkour act is coming, and we're also having a local Morris dancing group,
Goth
Hemlock
Morris dancing, right?
Goth Morris
Elizabeth is in.
dancing, and I am also a part of this group.
But quite down on Morris
well,
dancers.
it's actually it's quite, you
So
see, it's
defend yourself.
I will, and I think it's exactly what Jonathan is saying, because this particular group of Morris dancers has taken the tradition, so the traditional dance, but then brought it into the 21st century, and has made it sort of interesting and cool and edgy, so
less annoying,
and
less.
less.
I have to tell you, I find Morris dancers fundamentally annoying.
You need to try harder.
Yeah,
Really?
so
Is it my fault?
well, I
Said the audience
can
development
understand
man.
that. I can understand it, because like there's a lot of traditions, that are. I think a lot of Morris dancing sides are stuck in a particular tradition, and they can't move, and they don't want women to dance, but this particular side is progressive, while holding on to the idea of what Morris dancing was originally for, which is to connect with the seasons and to celebrate. On May morning, for instance, we went to a local park, Amtail Great Park, and there's a big hill there, and we danced up the rising sun, and that was a really special moment for me, actually. So I think it's about preserving the traditions, but just pushing them a little bit further into the more modern day. Like with the digital technology, I think that's a really great.
I want to come and see
it. Yeah, you should. You should. They're goths, yeah. Well, goths
With bells.
Goths
Goths
with bells and sticks. Yes.
Right. It's not incongruous at all.
No, not at all. No, I just wanted to build up a picture.
Yes, and they're called Hemlock Morris dancing. So it's all connected with the earth and the idea. Yeah, exactly. So the idea is
really
like maybe slightly dangerous and
they all die at the
end. We don't all die. But I think it's the idea of having these local groups, so the local parkour group and the local Morris dancing, and it's creating this connection with the whole town, and saying, come on, guys, we can all do this like together. And I know that's it might be that sort of sugary sweet, but I think that's in order for local arts organizations to survive and to really create a good vision for Bedford's cultural identity, we all need to be open and to be creating things like this all of the time together, and that's how we'll all grow and benefit the most.
And look, this is actually a key thing about the power of an installation like this, is it's not designed just for the Philharmonia to benefit its own audiences. Clearly that's going to be one of the things we look and measure, and we want that to happen. But actually the point is to create people who engage culturally, who didn't previously. And that's what we've been pushed very hard to do by our funders. We want to do it morally anyway, but actually Paul Hamlyn and Esmee Fairburn particularly have been really kind of pushing that with us. So when we first applied for this, I don't know if you know this, we didn't get rejected. They just told us to go and rewrite the initial application because they wanted more of that.
Okay.
And
I realise this may seem a little irrelevant, but when you say an application, we're not talking about 2 pages of A4.
Oh God, no! It's taken a year and a half to get the funding, and it's probably about 150 pages worth across various applications. But it's pretty extensive, and it is actually the largest non-arts council grants the Philharmonia's ever had. So it makes sense that they make us work for it. But the work that we really had to do was two things that were really pushing us. One was this notion of being better at the grassroots, and that's partly because this stuff has been out before. The Philharmonia has taken its digital elsewhere, but it hasn't really ever fully worked out how to create a proper legacy. It's not that it doesn't create legacy, it's just that the legacy is very difficult to really create in a way that is meaningful and sustainable.
What do you mean by legacy? I'm sorry, I just think
Absolutely
it's important
fine.
for you to define that.
We're here for 6 weeks.
Right.
That's a great chance to see lots of people. About 15,000 we anticipate in each place we go across those 6 weeks. Lots of school kids, brilliant, wonderful. But if you only come once and you only have that one interaction, what have you achieved? It's that classic Olympics 2012 question, right? Where, did uptake of schools' sports increase after the Olympics? There's lots of stats to say that maybe it didn't. Does uptake on music or any other cultural activity happen after an event like this? Well, we're trying bloody hard to try and make sure it happens, and the funders are really trying to push us to make sure that happens. So this sort of connection between the steering group, us, and that whole kind of ownership of something like this locally is fundamental. It's why we employed Tom. So he wasn't a post at the Philharmonia until this project happened, and that post got created because we recognised the deficiency in ourselves of being able to achieve that. We're really lucky. We found somebody who's kind of believes it to his core and is really inspiring in that. And he challenges every day internally. It's pushing us to work very differently.
I can't wait to meet him and grill him and make him feel really uncomfortable.
Good.
Great. Can I introduce one other rule?
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Don't tap the table.
Of course, you've got
It's
lots of
fine.
sensitive equipment that's going to go pear-shaped. The other thing that the funders are really pushing us on is evaluation. And it sort of goes to that first question you're asking, in that what they've asked us to do is a 4-year evaluation of this rather than just evaluating at the time. So we're doing a lot of surveys with people, anecdotal feedback as well as written. We've got a chalkboard which you go and have a look at in a bit.
Okay,
it's fun.
right.
Got lots of mostly positive, I think, comments.
Mostly positive.
some very creative drawings.
Okay, I'll look out for the negative stuff.
But we're also doing like a further 3 years worth of tracking what the journey is for people. Who's coming to it, who's engaging for the first time, where are they going next, are they not going anywhere next? Is it that through spending, the best part, well, it's about £650,000 across to deliver this across this time, is that actually having any impact? Are people changing their behaviours? And I said this to you in your interview. If it works for one person, I'm satisfied.
Yeah. But also, you can measure it in those sort of long-term way. But you can also just measure it in terms of one person going in by themselves and feeling part of something, feeling allowed to be part of something for an afternoon or whatever. There's a lady who lives locally, and we're not sure if she has a home or not, but she has come back once or twice, 3 times I think, and has spent a few hours in there just enjoying herself, and has come out and said to the staff that she feels really lucky to be allowed to be part of something like this.
Wow.
And that's a really powerful impact. And if what's ongoing for her is a memory, I mean,
you're right.
Isn't that
that's
nice?
Valid.
That's really valid as well. So
the stuff that you get from the stuff, the insights that you get from the research, are they insights that you will share with the rest of the industry?
Yeah, very much so. We actually already have our first sharing event scheduled for January. And that's specific to Bedford, and we'll do that in each location. There is a longer term plan to sort of do lots of sharing across the orchestral sector, ABO, those sorts of areas. And that will be largely focused on this idea of legacy, because it's sort of the golden nugget. It's the thing that is hardest to get right. And we will get lots of it wrong. We're not perfect, and there are things that I'm sure we're going to sort of miss or just have not really kind of anticipated. It might be that there are people that we just can't work out how to understand what their engagement is, and yet they may have an amazing engagement, and that's fine. That is fine, but
there are 2 other areas that I want to cover before I need to go off and get some lunch. Which is, I asked Tim Woodall this when he and I sat down to talk, which is, there's something about the Philharmonia. It's always the Philharmonia who are doing this kind of work, and I don't mean that in a negative way. There is something about the Philharmonia that results in a really immersive, almost 360 experience, aside from the virtual reality thing.
I know what you mean.
There is an investment in immersive experiences and digital experiences, and I can't understand why that is. Is it just something about the spirit of the organisation or somebody at the top?
What was Tim's answer?
I can't remember. Maybe I wasn't listening. I don't know. Which is a very nice way of me dodging that. But on paper, really, why aren't there other orchestras doing this?
It may not be fair to say there are no other orchestras doing it.
To the extent that you are.
To the extent that we are. Philharmonia is a big name. It's got history. And it's had people both in the orchestra itself and in the administration, who have believed that that's important and that type of engagement is sort of fundamental to what we're about. I think it's probably, if you ask, you'll get 100 different answers if you ask that question to everybody who either plays in the orchestra or works in the administration. But from my side, it sort of stems from what the musicians will tell you about what it's like being in the orchestra, and that's that they're constantly listening. And what marks them out from other orchestras, we've got all sorts of USPs, and you're right, the digital is one of those USPs, and we've invested financially in that, so that's one answer to this. Some people have said,
but that commitment to to investing financially is kind of where I'm coming from. That a lot of other organisations go, well, actually we haven't got the money for that, so we can't invest.
Well, you just choose where you put your money, right? And
yet there's a feeling that with the Philharmonia, actually, it's almost as though somebody somewhere has gone, no, this is the priority. I mean, that's the.
Well, look, we could have fundraised the same amount of money for something different, I guess, and it could have perhaps been more sort of internationally focused, or less about audience development, more about creating new types of product, or thinking about, what future concert models look like. There are all sorts of different things you could approach. It's just that we fundamentally believe that the music is great, that the orchestra are dynamic, and that everybody should try and interact in a dynamic way. And so where I was going with the point about the musicians is that every single conductor and artist who comes and works with the orchestra says basically the same thing, which is, I love playing with this orchestra because they really listen. And it sounds a bit silly because every musician should listen, but that's not always true. And for me, the USP of the Philharmonia is that they're responsive and they listen. And that makes them just incredible chamber musicians, even though we're a big body of musicians. And now, again, for me, this type of project grows out of that. It's us listening. It's organisationally saying, we hear that sometimes what we do is not necessarily accessible or meaningful to people, so we want to listen. And look, this is effectively a giant microphone because we've got people coming through all the time. It feels really lucky. I love being at the Philharmonia for this. It's bloody knackering, but that's another point.
Okay. Well, that's for another time, and maybe with somebody different with access to budgets. Tell me about the virtual orchestra. I want to tell you what I experienced, but I want you, both of you, to tell me to describe it first of all.
I reckon it'd be better coming from you, Elizabeth, because I've lived with it a long time.
He has passed that over to you without even a blink.
Okay, so the virtual orchestra in Bedford is in part of it is in a tent, so it's an installation in a big marquee. We're in Riverside Square, which looks out onto the river, and when you enter into the marquee, you enter into the string section first, and you experience when you obviously hear Holst's Planets, which it's nine pieces. There's 9 planets.
Oh no, right? It's only 8 planets,
eight
but
planets, 8 planets.
with an additional piece by Joby Talbot.
Yeah. Okay. So
planet.
yes. So there are different pieces, and so you're hearing all of this music as you walk through different sections of the orchestra. And in
it's a bit
each
like going
section,
to IKEA.
Yes, in
Without
each
having to buy anything at the end.
Concert ticket.
In each section, yeah, exactly. In each section, there is a screen where you get a close-up view of the musician who is playing each instrument, and so you get to see their skill and dexterity. And there, in some places, there are also tutorials. Like in the percussion room, we have a percussion tutorial, and people can actually join in the percussion room by playing the instruments. We have the glockenspiel and the tubular bells and the tam-tam and the bass drum. Yeah, so we have lots of different instruments that people can join in with, and we also have halfway through the exhibition. There's a dome with bean bags, and people can lie down on the bean bags and look up at various different screens and see how all the different musicians play together. And at various points we have Esa-Pekka, who is the artistic director and the principal conductor of the Philharmonia. And he...
You feel like you're being tested.
Well, it's nice to explain what it's about. And so we see his real passion, I think, in the pictures and in the recordings. And he has a real passion for the music and a real passion for bringing all of the musicians together. And then once you come out of the installation, we have a second part, which is in the glass box here where we're having this chat, and we have 6 virtual reality pods where people can put on the goggles and they're taken into the the orchestra pit, and they have Esa-Pekka, the conductor, in front of them, and they're invited just to be part of the orchestra in a virtual reality way.
They're in the middle.
So,
are you a musician?
Well, I used to be, but I'm not really anymore.
What do you play?
Well, I sing, and I used to play the cello, but don't ever ask me to play the cello.
Here's something I don't understand, that whenever you ask anybody, unless they're professional musicians, whenever you ask anybody, are you a musician, basically the default stance is be really apologetic about the fact that you're a musician.
I've got a really interesting story about this.
Really?
Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, well, now that you've said that, you need to tell us.
It's got to be good, hasn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's not that long. I did my first ever internship in Chicago. Young, sort of 22-year-old, bit bright-eyed, very English.
So a couple of years ago, then?
Yes, 3-4 years ago.
You see what
I got grey hair too. And I arrived my first day in the Chicago Symphony offices, very plush, very wonderful. Step into an elevator, couldn't quite work out what the floor numbers meant. That's all fine. Somebody helped me, and they said, "Oh, are you the new intern?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm Jonathan." And they said, "Oh, that's fabulous. What do you play?" And I said, "I play violin, but I'm really bad."
Yeah.
Very English, right?
Again,
and the response they said is quite wonderfully American. They said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and that was the end of the conversation.
So they took you literally.
I know, and I was like, "No,
I'm really crap.
I'm actually all right. I'm not that bad."
I am really bad. I'm not in any way good.
Well, so am I now.
But I'm struck by the. I'm going to use the word dissonance about the fact that we are. Trying to reach out to people who there's a group from school who are being introduced to musical instruments on the basis that basically we hope that they will pick up a musical instrument, and yet as adults we're all going, "Oh no, I wasn't very good." Do you know what I mean?
I do. It's English, right? And maybe Irish too.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, if you ask me, are you any good at drama? I would say yes. I'm very good at acting.
Okay, so
I'm very good at directing. But I think I've had this very sort of. Well, I actually started studying music when I left school, and I dropped out. And I think that has been the sort of. The deterioration of my confidence with music sort of began there.
But an installation like this.
Yes, I know, but that is why it's actually really lovely to come back and work on a project like this, because in a way I feel I've come full circle, and I see the cellos in the tent, and I think, it meant so much to me, and I think I'm revisiting those feelings now, which is
and hey,
powerful.
People can and do bring their instruments and play along.
Really?
My dad's driving down to Birmingham to bring his French horn and play along with this for a day.
Wow.
Apparently he's also volunteering for you, but you may not get much time out of him. It is one of the really powerful things here is that, everything Elizabeth explained about that walkthrough is fundamentally saying you can engage with this piece of music and an orchestra in whatever way you choose. You can sit and close your eyes and enjoy it in that dome. You can sit and just watch the flute player pick his nose, which he does.
Really?
The piccolo player, Keith, yeah. I'm going to name him and shame him. Keith Bragg picks his nose at one point in this. Yeah,
you've not done orchestral management, have you?
It's all right, it's Keith.
I really wouldn't do that.
Yeah, he's a lot bigger than me, actually, at that point. If you sit and watch him for 55 minutes, you'll get one.
Right, okay. I was struck by how, when I experienced it the first time in the festival hall, that I got quite emotional.
Yep.
I didn't expect to. I mean, it is essentially walking around an art installation, and I don't want to do it down, but I didn't. It's a mixed media installation.
Spot on.
I didn't expect to stand there in the woodwind section and feel like, oh my God, why am I wanting to cry? What is that about?
Have you ever played in an orchestra?
Yeah, no, I have. Yes,
have you had the same experience when you've been in an orchestra?
No.
Okay, I have only a couple of times, but I have.
I mean, I loved playing in County Youth Orchestra. I loved
Yeah.
it, and I think that there was something about being in the middle of the clarinetist. So essentially, you're in the middle of the orchestra, and when you're on slightly raked seating, then effectively you tower over people, and that's a rather nice feeling, I think. But I never really had that rush when I was a teenager of, oh my God!
Yeah.
But when I went back there to experience it, it was like I was being transported.
Well, you're part of something, right?
Yes.
And right, when you were a teenager in a county youth orchestra, you were still part of something, and maybe for whatever reason it didn't quite speak so thoroughly good.
Hey,
see what I did
you
there?
are just on message.
Whereas, for want of a better way of putting it, they're a bloody good orchestra. And like I said earlier, they really listen. And even on film, which is a recorded, documented, one-off thing, I suppose because there's 37 screens, you can see it any which way. But actually, you're part of it as an audience member, and you're drawn into it. And I've only ever experienced that myself on stage a couple of times. So I dabbled in conducting a bit at university, and I was shit at it. But there was one moment in the middle of a Mozart symphony.
You just said that you were shit at it. Maybe you weren't.
I actually was pretty shit at conducting. I think I can say that quite objectively.
Fine.
But there was one moment where it suddenly felt like all the music was going through me and out to the audience. And I suppose in somewhere like this, certainly for some people, that's the sort of experience they end up having.
It triggers emotions, and actually I had a similar experience when I did the VR thing. I mean, that was.
Are you coming in September?
What's happening in September?
So, for our new season at the Festival Hall, the sort of next iteration of VR, which was just at South by Southwest in America, is being showcased on the Claw Ballroom again.
Right.
So I'm going to do the plug, 27th to the 30th of September.
So you've plugged 3 things and I haven't even asked.
And there aren't that many slots because we can only put sort of 5 or 6 people in there at once. But it's rather than just having a headphones on, it's an ambisonic speaker array, which sounds like an awfully technical way of saying effectively you're sonically put in a space.
Yes.
And
what with one of those dome things that only project sound in the area of the
effectively,
dome. Right.
and also then visually you can either have the headset on and be part of that, or just sort of not have the headset on. Either way, what's really interesting is we've been trialling that in our offices. Quite a few of the orchestra who were playing in the piece that's featured in that is Mahler 3 that was recorded live last September. Quite a few of the musicians were playing, so you'd expect them to sort of look at it quite sort of objectively. They came out crying, including our concertmaster, Holst. Again, not doing a good orchestra manager job. But no, he seriously was the same reaction that you've just said you had. He had, and there's something. I don't think it's quantifiable, right?
It's fundamental, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
it's fundamental to who we are, because it's the music that we're listening to, which is genius, and then you see these extremely talented individuals playing the instrument they have spent so much time learning and are part of them really when they're playing, and it's that idea of something just so perfect almost, that humans can actually do this, and that we can bring people together through this shared understanding or shared experience of listening to the music, so I think it's that idea of coming together, like Jonathan said, and perfection.